I am Joni with Looking at Careers with Joni, and I'm here today with Kristen from KP Home. Kristen has worked most of her life in selling software and services, but recently she started her own business doing interior design at KP Home. So, Kristen, how are you today?
I'm doing really great. How are you, Joni?
I'm great. So, Kristen, you recently started this company. It's been about a year now.
Yep.
And I know you're busy because every time I try to call you, I have a hard time getting in touch with you. Um, do you want to talk a little bit about your business and what you're doing, and then we could kind of go into your history of how you got here? Well, tell us about KP Home.
Sure. So I started KP Home officially about a year ago in 2021, and I am a full service interior design business. So helping clients from the conceptual phase all the way through completion and really just elevating their home and making it the space that makes them happy and comfortable.
That's great. And I know you're based in Chicago,
I am.
but you don't just work in Chicago. I know that you've traveled around and helped people all over the country.
That's right. I'm based in the city of Chicago, but have active projects within the city, outside of the city, in the Chicagoland suburbs, as well as other states like Wisconsin and Florida. So kind of
That's
a jack of all trades in terms of where I'm willing to go.
yeah, people could contact you to go anywhere,
Hmm.
and you're very talented. I've seen some of your work.
Thank you.
So, Kristen, how'd you get started years ago? How did you know this was what you wanted to do?
Sure. Way back when. I have always had a passion for art and interior design and kind of the creative side of things. And growing up, I remember always asking to redo my own room and pick out a new comforter or paint. I helped my mom with like house projects, whether she asked for my help or not. And I was the kid watching HGTV and after school instead of kind of your typical cartoons or other kids shows. It just was always a huge passion of mine. I took some classes in high school. And then when it comes time to kind of deciding what you want to do for college, I think I decided that I thought I should have a more traditional career or college path, and go to a bigger university, get a business degree. And the creative side was just kind of a hobby that I could do outside of my 9 to 5, whatever that ended up being.
Right. So, when you got out of college, what did you end up doing?
I graduated at a tough time in 2010, so the job market was very sparse. But through some networking opportunities, I ended up getting a job at a big financial services company, kind of doing customer success for them. So I was working with our internal sales people, technical teams, and then I was also client facing in terms of just making sure that they were successful with the products that they bought from that company.
Oh, and that's great.
Yeah.
And then you moved out of financial.
I did. I had reached a point of needing a change and ended up looking at some other companies and went smaller to a local tech company based out of Chicago that was doing litigation software, which I had no idea what that was or what that even meant. um,
Well, wait, let me stop you there for a minute
sure.
because that wasn't your background. You
Right.
didn't know anything about legal. What skills did you have that they looked at you and said, she could do this?
It's a good question. A lot of it, I think, was my client experience. So I started that role that I got hired into, was a sales support role. So I was not working directly with clients right out of the gate, but a lot of it was client exposure, kind of organization around managing client expectations, both internal and external when you're working with sales folks and other departments, and then your actual external clients. Um, and honestly, it was I think a willingness to learn and ask a lot of questions and just really be curious about what the industry was, how the company operated, and and how to do things.
Right. Great. And from there, you got promoted into sales?
That's right. I got promoted into an account management role and bounced around a couple different teams working with different client bases, and then ultimately made it my way up to like a senior account executive managing some of our largest multi-million dollar clients.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
So I'm going to assume you were making good money.
I was. I was. Thank
And
luckily.
I, yeah, and I know it's really hard to jump out on your own when you're making good money or even to make a change to another company because you never know how that's going to work out. So, how did you make that leap?
Uh, it was a slow build. It was not an overnight change for sure, but it was a roller coaster, to be honest, from kind of getting this itch or having an itch on like the creative side, that I was doing some design projects for myself. I was just always really interested in that, and it just was always kind of a voice on my shoulder of like, this is still here, this is something that you're really interested in. um, and just thinking through, when I kind of pulled back a little bit and made some, you have to turn inward a little bit and do some self reflection and evaluation of like, what is it about this current job that I'm in that I like? What is it that doesn't bring me joy and isn't making me happy? And I kind of outlined all of that stuff. And there is a lot that was safe and comfortable and easy. Um, but in the day to day, it just wasn't, I wasn't living my best life,
Right.
as people say. Uh, and so I think that element of it was like, okay, I need to kind of like step back and say, like, what am I doing on a day to day basis that I like, that I don't like, and how do I kind of categorize those things?
Right. So, I mean, those are two really different industries, creative and any kind of sales. I think sales is more repetition
Hmm.
and creative is more creative. So how do you mesh those things? What did you like best that you saw you could transfer?
So I think in doing my research on just like the design industry as a whole, the thing I kept seeing over and over again was running an interior design business is 80% the business and 20% design. And some people think it's like, oh, I'm just picking things out and getting to do fun things, but like there's actually a lot more to it. And what I realized and what I really liked about my job in sales was the consultancy and education part of it. So in college, that was actually my major was business consulting. And so I really liked that element of kind of taking somebody's challenge or problem and trying to find a solution and presenting it in a way that makes the most sense for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a huge part. And I think that transfers over to design, is there's a lot of education that goes into the whole process from, again, concept to completion and all the steps in between.
Yeah.
There's a huge education part of it. It's also a big puzzle to solve of like taking a space that people want to change and figuring out what you can actually fit in there, what works. And so that's the part that I love doing.
Yeah.
Uh, and there's structure and repetition in that, but then each time I can kind of do something a little bit different from like the end product. So it's a mesh of the the sales process of repetition and process and organization, but then getting to like be creative in how you put those things together.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So when you put those together, do you have like a toolbox of patterns and materials and things like that that you bring to someone, or do you go out shopping? How do you accomplish that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So I just was at this big trade show for the interior design market. It's a major furniture show that I felt like a kid in a candy store just going through all the different showrooms. Um, but I think I have my own kind of personal style and things that I like. But then a huge part of my process is really getting to understand each client. And, sometimes it can get a little personal because they invite me into their home, which is a very sacred space for people. And so I think tailoring it to having some initial ideas, but making sure that I really get to know the client and their interests and their lifestyle and their preferences to then see what would be the best fit. So I feel like I have my brands that
Yeah.
I go to, but willing to kind of think outside the box too, depending on the client.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be your best client or your worst client because I never know what I like.
That's okay. Sometimes that's a
So,
blank canvas.
yeah, so that I might be your best client because whatever
Hmm.
you liked, I'd probably love.
Yes.
um, how did you learn the marketing of finding clients and getting in front of people, or is it all just word of mouth?
Um, right now it's a lot of word of mouth. I think building up to actually launching the business, there's still a lot of fear and nervousness around like, okay, I'm going to do this. Can I do it? Will it be received well? Um, and so from a marketing perspective, I think the first step was kind of like, okay, you just have to start and just start somewhere, and brands evolve, people evolve, you grow, you learn. And like, if you don't just start, you won't know where to kind
Right.
of take it. And so starting was the first thing that I put it out on Instagram and
Hmm.
kind of told people in my network what I was doing. And then that got a couple initial clients from people that I went to college and high school with that I haven't seen in a while. So they then gave my name out to others. And that's been a great opportunity to get some exposure and projects. Right now, I'm also looking into like other marketing opportunities and leveraging social media and what other tools might be out there in terms of just getting the name kind of outside of the general
Right.
circle.
And I know that could take up your whole life trying to figure out the social media part of it and getting
Oh my
people.
gosh, totally. It's I liked, coming from a sales company too, and it was a complicated software that I consider myself pretty tech savvy, but there is something about social media that can be daunting.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm learning the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, so when people in their lives are ready to make a change and deep in their heart, they know what they love, but they're really afraid to make that leap. Do you have advice for anybody?
Oh, good question. Um, a couple things come to mind. I think the first is really not being afraid to listen to that kind of inner voice and that thing that does give you a lot of happiness and brings you joy, that like if you can, don't ignore that, I think is kind of the first piece of advice. And the second is take some time to figure out and build to what might be best for you. And I know that's kind of like pie in the sky, not
Yes.
super tangible, but I spent, before I actually launched the business, I spent over a year just one, convincing myself that this is what I wanted to do, and two, um, figuring out how to make it work. And, there's stuff that kind of comes with that of like making sure you have capital to support it in some way or another, or you reach out to the industry that you're trying to break into and leverage the people in your network for that. And so for me, that was the best, I think, ramp to making
Hmm.
this launch. And back to the first piece of advice that I gave is that I was actually working with a business coach who was more just so on like leadership and um, how people like to lead and what your style is. And she was the first person that I really said out loud, like, I really love interior design and it's something that I want to do. And she's like, your whole demeanor changed and you got excited and a smile came on your face. And I think just putting that stuff out there is and listening to that feeling and saying, okay, this is something that I'm really interested in, and start exploring it, whether it's looking at companies that are under that industry, finding people in your network that work in there and just asking a bunch of questions. And from there you can start to learn so much and really start to refine what change might look like for you.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've read these kinds of things like I have. Um, and it's kind of a double edged sword. And one is don't go into an industry for the money. Yet, when you're making money or figuring out your structure of how you're going to charge people, don't undervalue your worth. So, I always find that funny. Do it just for the because it makes you happy, but you better be charging what you're worth, or you're never going to end up being happy. You're never going to get what you're worth.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny you say that. I just uh this trade show that I was at had a couple like educational sessions, and there was a recurring theme of that,
Oh.
of charge what you're worth, and you're worth a lot when you start to break it down. Like, even if in using the design as industry as an example, is
Mhm.
I don't have a formal degree in interior design, and it's not required. In some states it might be to be registered, but in Illinois it's not. um, and in the back of my head I was like, well, I don't have a formal degree or training, so to me I'm starting like the lowest level of seasoned that you could
Mhm.
get, right? But in reality, I've been designing for myself for 20 years,
Right.
and I've been interested in that world, and I've gathered a ton of info from just watching the TV shows and whatever. Um, but also the sales experience and the business experience that I have brings a ton of value. So I think that kind of goes back to like zooming out a little bit and saying, like, where do my skills fall and what can be transferred into
Right.
this new space? Because a lot of it can be, it just becomes a different topic that maybe you talk
Right.
about, right?
Well, and a little more on that line, people who have been in the industry for 20 years and they have that formal training become less creative.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when people are working with you, the sky's the limit. And these other people who have all this experience become a little more jaded just because they do reach a point where I'm going to get this done. It's going to be nice. I'm going to make people happy, but I'm not going to use all my creativity to make that happen because it takes a lot of energy to do that.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, yeah, it's interesting starting up. I know that it is,
Yeah.
but
The other thing that I just thought of too, if
uh,
I can add to it, is, um, and this came from this leadership coach that I thought was super helpful, is kind of write down your own internal blockers of like why you think you can't make a change,
oh,
and like
interesting,
and start to look at that list and be like, okay, is that truly something that like is insurmountable, or how can I what's the solution there? And for one of the ones for me in the beginning was like, do I need a formal interior design degree? Like, I don't know if I want to pay money and get new student loans to go back to school, and so this
right?
feels unattainable. But the reality was I didn't need a degree, um, to change industries. And so I'm a details person, and so that research was super helpful to me. But I think that was like another really impactful exercise for me before,
Yeah,
as I
that's.
like built this.
Um, do you still watch HD? Oops. Do you still watch HD TV?
I do. There is a there's a it's funny, like talking to a bunch of other designers in the industry. It's like HTV has kind of given this glamour to the renovation world of like your budget is not going to realistically be $60,000 to redo your whole house in 6 weeks. There's a lot
Right.
more to it, but um, I love those types of shows. So I just watched one called Rock the Block, which was great.
Wow. Yeah, I like watching those too, but I don't get out of it what you get out of it.
I'm like,
I'm
this is
sure I
homework to
don't.
me.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Um, well, if people want to get in touch with you and get some work done, how do they find you?
Sure. My website is kphome.us, or you can find me on Instagram at home by KP. And feel free to reach out on either of those platforms, and I'd love to chat.
Great. Great, Kristen. It was really interesting talking to you today. I'm glad we had this time to talk for a while.
Yes.
And again, I'm Joni from Looking at Careers with Joni. If you like this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up below and put some comments in the comment field. So, Kristen, thanks again.
Thank you
Um,
so much, Joni.
and hopefully, we'll talk again one of these days.
I hope so.